Welcome. This is quite an exciting opportunity for us today, and have my very warm welcome to all of you to this Tax Inspectors Without Borders event. The COVID-19 crisis has wreaked havoc on the economies of the world. The tight fiscal space in which developing countries find themselves is no longer sustainable, especially in context of massive investment needs for the SDGs. Simultaneously, the tolerance for tax evasion is diminishing, and tax is a front-page news, and tackling illicit financial flows getting more attention than ever. It is important for multilateral organizations to support national governments to tackle tax evasion and illicit financial flows. In a world that is divided by borders, the Tax Inspectors Without Borders experts, working together with other multilateral partners, are supporting governments in more than 50 countries. Today, we will see the launch of the 2021 Tiwb annual report that elaborates on the work of Tiwb during the period of June 2020 to June 2021. This will be followed by a high-level ministerial panel that will discuss on the role of Tiwb and tackling tax avoidance and evasion in the post-pandemic era. It's my pleasure to welcome all our esteemed panelists and attendees to this event. But before we started, I would like to share a few housekeeping rules. I would also like to remind our speakers today to please mute their microphones unless you are intervening. Please note that this webinar is being recorded, and you will need to accept the recording to attend the webinar. Interpretations into French, Spanish, and Arabic is being provided. You may select the interpretation channel of your choice in the bottom of the Zoom window. We would like to take a quick group photo before we get started. So if all panelists and speakers today kindly turn on their cameras, they will just take a minute. Melanie will direct us. Over to you, Melanie.
Thank you, Marcos, and welcome to all of our esteemed panelists and speakers. We will just give everyone a minute here to turn on their camera. I think we're missing a few. Wonderful. I think for Tulani, are you also there? Once we have everyone on screen. Okay, well, I think we can go with that. Maybe Tulani's not on camera today, no problem. So if we can get a big smile from all our speakers on 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to take one more just to be sure. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. Back to you, Marcos.
Thank you, Melanie, for the picture. We will now hear from our co-hosts and co-chairs of the Tiwb Governing Board, Mr. Matthias Cormann, Secretary General for OECD, and Mr. Achim Steiner, Administrator of UNDP. Without further ado, let's hear from the co-chairs.
Distinguished guests, colleagues, as the new co-chair of the OECD UNDP Tax Inspectors Without Borders Governing Board, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's high-level meeting alongside Achim Steiner, UNDP's administrator. Our discussions today will focus on Tax Inspectors Without Borders' expanded mandate, which will help governments in developing countries adopt new and innovative tax tools, adjust to the new international tax rules, and leverage South-South expertise. We will also look at how Tax Inspectors Without Borders programs can help developing countries build capacity to combat illicit financial flows more effectively. Let me take this opportunity to thank my predecessor, Angel Guerilla, for championing Tax Inspectors Without Borders over the last 6 years. Over the past 19 months, governments around the world have been seriously challenged by the impact of the COVID pandemic. The economic recovery is underway. The economic outlook is improving. Since the middle of 2020, we have been consistently upgrading our GDP projections with global growth now expected to reach 5.7% this year and 4.5% next year. But COVID-19 has reshaped many aspects of our economy and of our societies. In particular, it has accelerated the digital transformation of our economies and societies, and it has reduced public tolerance for profitable multinational enterprises not paying their fair share of tax. That's why the two-pillar solution on tax reform, agreed last month by 136 members of the OECD G20 Inclusive Framework on BEPS to tackle the tax challenges arising from digitalization, is so important. This landmark deal on international tax reform will reallocate more than $125 billion US of profits from around 100 of the world's largest and most profitable multinationals to the markets where they operate and generate their profits. It also establishes for the first time a globally agreed minimum corporate tax rate of 15%, which is expected to generate around $150 billion US in new tax revenues globally. Over the coming years, these reforms will impact and reduce profit-shifting activities. Tax Inspectors Without Borders programs are helping tax administrations across the world build capacity and fight tax avoidance and evasion to ensure that businesses pay their fair share of taxes. In this spirit, they will also provide bespoke technical assistance to help developing countries implement the two-pillar international tax reform solution. The latest Tax Inspectors Without Borders annual report, which reviews its achievements from July 2020 to June 2021, confirms that Tax Inspectors Without Borders is continuing to make great progress in helping countries mobilize domestic resources in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. Despite the challenges imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic, more than $1.4 billion US in additional tax revenues and $3.9 billion US in overall tax assessments have been raised by developing countries receiving assistance under 96 Tax Inspectors Without Borders programs to date. Those programs represent excellent value for money. For every dollar spent on Tax Inspectors Without Borders activities, an average of $125 in supplementary tax revenues is recovered by host administrations, a figure which has increased almost twofold over the past year. The classic Tax Inspectors Without Borders model for audit assistance is now being applied to criminal tax investigations, and the effective use of information exchanged automatically between governments, both of which help fight illicit financial flows. New pilot programs will also cover natural resource and environmental tax issues. Dear Achim, distinguished guests, colleagues, the OECD is very proud to partner with UNDP on this remarkable, results-driven initiative. We look forward to hearing your comments and contributions. Thank you for your continued support and your commitment.
Secretary General of the OECD, dear Matthias, distinguished ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is a privilege to join the launch of the Tax Inspectors Without Borders 2021 annual report launched today. This year's event takes place while many communities across the world are still suffering from the devastating socioeconomic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. There are also stark inequalities between countries that we have seen. The global dashboard for vaccine equity shows that 1 in 2 people have received at least 1 dose of the vaccine in high-income countries. In low-income countries, that figure is just 1 in 21. As the OECD points out, the large differences in vaccination rates between countries are adding to the unevenness of the global economic recovery. Indeed, the pandemic has stretched the already thin finances of many developing countries to breaking point. Many of them are now facing debt distress. And there is a risk that entire countries could be left behind as a green recovery gathers momentum in some parts of the world. In this fluid context, developing countries require tailored support and assistance to help raise the revenues they need to invest in a net zero future. To this end, Tax Inspectors Without Borders has continued to work with governments across the world to raise significant levels of revenue, despite the challenges posed by the pandemic during the last almost 2 years. Since 2015, the initiative has helped developing countries to raise $1.4 billion in additional taxation revenues through 96 ongoing and completed programs. And an expanded project generously supported by Finland and Norway will help countries to make more direct links between these revenues and measures that advance the Sustainable Development Goals. The initiative will also provide new levels of support to countries to tackle illicit financial flows. This will be vital to tackle the trade of endangered species as well as illegal forestry and fishing, for instance, a multi-billion-dollar trade. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear Matthias, on behalf of the United Nations Development Programme, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the OECD for their continued cooperation on an initiative that continues to generate impressive results. As this annual report shows, for every $1 invested in Tax Inspectors Without Borders, an excellent return of over $125 is generated in revenue for developing countries. That is a return on investment I think we can all appreciate as we work together to build forward from this pandemic and do so towards a greener, a more inclusive and a more sustainable future for all. In that spirit, our OECD and UNDP partnership will, I hope, continue to thrive under the leadership of Matthias and his team at the OECD, just as we did with Angel Gurria during the years in which this initiative was conceived. And certainly from UNDP's side, we are fully committed to contribute and to continue to make this the success story that it has been. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our co-chairs. For those that don't know me, my name is actually Marcus Nieto, and I'm the director of UNDP's Finance Sector Hub. And it's my pleasure to be working very close to the colleagues at OECD on Tiwb matters. Without further ado, let me bring it on the team that are going to present us the annual report, the head of the Tiwb Secretariat, Rusudan Kimularia, and Mr. Atashan Khan, head of tax strategies at UNDP. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marcos. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So it is my pleasure to welcome you and to brief you about the annual report, some highlights, and about Tiwb initiative and its current developments. Tax Inspectors Without Borders is a joint initiative of the OECD and UNDP. It's a unique approach to a capacity building which embeds tax experts in developing countries' tax administrations to provide a practical hands-on assistance on real actual audit cases and international tax issues. So as Marcos mentioned, in a period of a tight fiscal space and as tolerance for tax evasion and tax avoidance continues to drop, Tiwb demonstrates clear relevance for domestic resource mobilization. So even more with the niche mandate and track record of efficient and effective tax resource mobilization for developing countries, Tiwb can help raise the revenues needed to overcome the pandemic's socio-economic repercussions. So next slide, please. So Tiwb numbers. You have seen that Secretary General mentioned that we, despite the COVID challenges, continued our operations, and approximately 19% of our programs are in progress. So as of June 30th, 2021, Tiwb programs spanned 47 jurisdictions with 47 completed and 43 current programs. including 17 South-South programs. To respond to the particular challenges of delivering capacity building during the pandemic, TIWB prioritized remote assistance, which allowed operations to continue effectively. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of the revenue figures, so since 2012, TIWB and TIWB style audit assistance, including anonymized casework conducted during joint workshop with African Tax Administration Forum, OECD, and the World Bank Group, has led to impressive results in terms of the increased tax revenues and tax assessments in participating countries. So a total of 1.4 billion in additional tax revenues collected and 3.8 billion in additional tax assessed are attributed to these programs across Africa, Asia, and Eastern Europe, as well as Latin America and Caribbean. Next slide, please. Types of the assistance. As you know, the TIWB has traditionally focused on providing assistance on complex transfer pricing audits, but the same model, hands-on assistance, is equally applicable for other types of the tax audit and investigations. So TIWB model has been expanded to cover criminal tax investigation programs and a crucial element in the global fight against illicit financial flows. The initiative is also exploring and expanding other opportunities for pilot programs and effective use of automatic exchange of information. Here we're very closely work with the Global Forum, who is responsible for the transparency agenda and the implementation of the international standards. So here we again help developing countries to materialize all the standards on ground and effectively implement in the case when they are reciprocal and very in line with their domestic and international rules. So the other areas where we are exploring the potential work, the role for the TIWB as the taxation of natural resource, contracts and taxation and the environment. So here we together with our stakeholder exploring the potential pilot programs. However, it is important to mention that we will not deviate from the key mandate of the initiative, and the same structure will apply for the new areas, which is learning by doing approach, confidentiality arrangements, no substitution, and most importantly, the host administrations will have a final say in the sovereign right to make a decision in which sector they want to receive the assistance. They make a decision on the expert selection. At the end of the day, they design the scope for the program together with our expert deployed from the roster or the partner administration. So next slide. So yes, that was a very challenging time for us as well. So operations under COVID-19. Since March 2020, the COVID crisis has prevented all on-site TIWB missions. Also, TIWB host administration's capacities have been constrained, as many countries suspended or curtailed audit activities due to the strict lockdown measures in countries. So to continue its business operations during the COVID pandemic, TIWB expanded remote assistance for program implementation. Even more, TIWB will maintain a flexible approach to address the priorities of tax administration, offering a blended method, meaning we will provide the assistance on site, hopefully next year, since next year, and combine this with remote assistance. So this blended approach will help host administrations receive greater and timely access to experts, as well as save resources and reduce the experts' carbon footprint by decreasing travels. At the same time, it is important to stress the essential aspects of the on-site missions, because the main mandate and the main objective of the TIWB is to build tax audit capacity to our programs. Therefore, it is critical for us to transfer the skills and the knowledge on-site during the learning by using the doing by learning approach. So next slide, please. So here I will ask my dear colleague Atasham Khan to continue the presentation. Over to you, Atasham. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruslan. Thank you, Marcos. Respected co-chairs, distinguished participants, tax experts from across the globe. I can see more than around 500 participants right now representing 100 countries. Colleagues and friends, good morning, afternoon. Ruslan discussed the time during COVID, how Tiwb is supporting countries when they have declining fiscal spaces by providing technical assistance remotely. I will take this opportunity to discuss beyond the programmatic work, the time that we have invested last year on how Secretariat has focused on creating some robust structures and processes which will allow Tiwb assistance to be delivered on a larger scale and link that work with impact. There are four important aspects of this work. One is the e-learning module for tax experts. Building on the experience of implementing capacity building, Tiwb is now launching an e-learning module. This interactive module will prepare experts ahead of the program deployment and will give them insights on how to optimize support provided to the local audit teams, be it on-site delivery or, as Ruslan was mentioning, as we are going for a hybrid module from next year. This module will be accessible through the online knowledge sharing platform. The other aspect of the work is the mentorship program. Under this program, a mentee expert will be selected and deployed together with a lead tax expert on a Tiwb program. The mentee will actively participate in supporting the host administration officials on real cases alongside the mentor. The mentor will provide the supervision and the guidance for this mentee. This program will provide an opportunity for experience sharing between the mentor, mentee, and the host administration. And the idea is that the mentee will become a more senior and experienced tax training official within his or her own tax administration. The other aspect of the work, which is sort of very critical, is the monitoring and evaluation system. Over the course of last 1 year, we have spent a lot of time in creating a more robust theory of change for tax inspectors without borders. This is in sync with the Addis Ababa Action Agenda and looks at beyond revenue, beyond the domestic resource mobilization, and looks also at capacity building and behavioral changes. This new monitoring and evaluation framework and theory of change clearly articulates Tiwb's programs objectives and identifies the inputs that can contribute to its success. More importantly, it will allow us to go for more qualitative and quantitative impact assessments of the impact that the Tiwb programs are having. A Tiwb program scorecard has also been created to harmonize these indicators to assess the assistance that's being provided. Can I have the next slide, please? Another important aspect of the work that we have put in is on creating a new Tiwb roster. As Ruslan was mentioning, we are expanding into new areas beyond tax audit and criminal tax investigations and helping countries better use automatically exchange information and tax and environment. To help deliver on these different and expanded areas over the course of last 1 year, working together with colleagues and teams across UNDP and OECD, we have established a new roster. Through the present process, now we have a very competent pool of extremely competent global tax experts with different language expertise who are now available to support host tax administrations with the best tax expertise that is available globally. As you can see on your screen, in the present roster, the number of female experts and the experts for Global South are substantially higher than the earlier one. Can I have the next slide, please? UNDP has on-ground presence and network that spans 170 countries and territories. Leveraging these on-ground resources and expertise of the UNDP country offices, we are working to bring the work of Tiwb to scale. On one hand, the country offices are helping with different aspects of programmatic support to effectively deliver the Tiwb's technical assistance. This programmatic support has become more critical during COVID when assistance is being provided remotely. Here, country offices are stepping up to make available various digital means of support to deliver TIWB assistance. From Cambodia to Egypt, the country offices have helped the national tax administrations with accessing hardware, software licenses, communication tools to effectively access the remote assistance. Fostering trust and relationship building is very difficult, and specifically during remote delivery of the work, it's more difficult. And here the role of the UNDP country offices is becoming more critical. They're helping tax experts navigate some complex cultural barriers that they might face since they come from different countries and cultures. And they're helping them build trust with the tax administrations and administrators at the national level to deliver the TIWB expertise. Similarly, from Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Cabo Verde to Colombia, the country offices are helping the tax experts communicate in local languages. And they're also helping facilitate national tax administration access the TIWB's assistance by helping them see the connections between the work that they are doing and how TIWB's technical assistance can help support their work. And they are helping sort of building synergy between the work of different developmental partners in a way that we can avoid duplication of work. On the other hand, and more critically, any effective and impactful technical assistance requires that the gains from the technical assistance are institutionalized in domestic structures. And this takes time to create. And here the presence of country offices is critical because the TIWB programs is only for around 1.5 and 2 years. But through the presence of the UNDP country offices, we are now working to institutionalize the gains of TIWB programs in these domestic structures, as well as connect the work of TIWB to broader SDG outcomes. UNDP already has an existing portfolio of different programs and projects on financing the SDGs. This includes the integrated national financing frameworks. Now country offices are helping governments view TIWB as part of a larger offer on financing the SDGs and helping them make the connection between the revenue and the expenditure also to deliver on the impact. Next slide, please. As Marcos initially mentioned, taxation is now a front page news, and taxation is critical not only as a source for sustainable resource mobilization, but is also sort of a critical cord connecting the individual with the state and is essential for a responsible governance system. However, for a deeper social contract, it's important that the way people perceive and interact with taxation change. And that can only happen if taxation systems are equitable and tax revenues can be linked to developmental outcomes. To sort of help countries see the connections of the TIWB work with the broader impact, we are helping develop the country engagement plans. The country engagement plans are adding a framing to the work of TIWB, whereby the standalone work of TIWB experts will be linked to long-term systemic changes. Under the new strategy, country offices will work to support tax administrations linked TIWB program with systemic reforms, and more importantly, connect the work to achieving the SDGs related to climate, health, gender, and leaving no one behind. To support governments, now we have much more support from the UNDP side in our regional hubs in Amman, Pretoria, Istanbul, Bangkok, and Panama. And the country engagement plans in a way are sort of bringing all of this together and helping the National Tax Administration see the connections with the work of TIWB with the SDGs. At this point, I will hand it back to Rustan to discuss the next steps of the initiative. Over to you, Rustan.
Thank you very much, Atsham. So next slide, please. Very quickly. So what are the next steps? So we are close to reach the 100 programs, hopefully, if not by end of this year, early next year. Resume on-site missions from 2022. We discussed why it is so critical, because the mandate is to transfer the skills and the knowledge so to the in the developing countries tax administration, so that where we need to materialize the border approach, which is learning by doing, roll out the criminal tax investigation programs, which is one of the aspects of the TIWB. Tax-related, fight the tax-related illicit financial flows. So deliver at least 3 automatic exchange of information pilot programs by end of 2022 here. We just recently launched Malaysia program, and we hope that in 2022 we'll have more programs and we'll start to roll out 2023. Increase the South-South cooperation and explore the new areas, which is mainly the digitalization of tax administration and taxation and the environment. Here we are at the very initial incubator stage where we need to define the scope for the initiative. So, and as already discussed, we will not deviate from the key mandate and the niche of the assistance. So, and launch the new mentoring programs, and here focus on the women, ensure that we have equal participation and provide the technical assistance to developing countries on Pillar 2 under the new rules, and here explore the potential the role for the initiative to assist developing countries and the implementation of the 2-pillar solution. So with this, I stop here and thank you all for your participation and your attention. And over to Marcos. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rusdan and Atashan. And I think we all can see the huge progress in the last 12 months, despite the challenges of being operating all virtual in that aspect. But the really important thing is to hear from governments, to hear the people that benefit from this impressive initiative. In that sense, let me introduce you all to a dear friend of mine and one of the greatest brains behind this, Ben Dixon, the head of the Global Relations and Development Division at the Center for Tax Policy Administration at OECD, who will lead us on a panel discussion with the beneficiaries, the governments, the partners that we have in that sense. Ben carries us over on this really important panel discussion now. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Marcos. Great to see you. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. As Marcos has said, it's my privilege and pleasure to guide you through the next bit of our meeting, which will be a panel discussion involving 5, not 4 as advertised, 5 esteemed guests who I will introduce in a second. And as Marcos has said, the task now is to really focus on the country level and to talk about what impact Tax Inspectors Without Borders is having, and to kind of set that in the context of broader domestic resource mobilization challenges that countries are facing. Just to remind you that interpretation facilities are available. You'll be hearing speakers in different languages in this session. And also to remind you that as you listen, please do use the Q&A to pose questions, which if there's time after an initial round of questions, which I will pose to our panelists, we will take on. And as Atashan says, with over 500 people on the call, I'm sure there will be no shortage of interesting questions. So as to our speakers, let me take them one by one, and then I'll ask each of them a question, which they'll address in a first round of comments. So first of all, Alejandro Zelaya, Minister of Finance of El Salvador, welcome to you. Excellency Mr. Ahmed Kudshuk, Vice Minister of Finance from Egypt. Her Excellency Catherine Gunsadze, Deputy Minister of Finance from Georgia. Mr. Tulani Shongwe, who is Manager of Resource Mobilization at the Africa Tax Administration Forum, ATAF. And finally, Vice Minister Angela Madrid, Deputy Director of the Tax Administration of Honduras. Distinguished guests, welcome to you all. We're delighted that you could give up your time to discuss this exciting and important project. So Alejandro Zelaya, Minister of Finance, El Salvador, the first question to you. If you could tell us what are El Salvador's challenges in international taxation and how you think tax inspectors without borders can help. And then as a supplementary question, if you could say what you think some of the priorities are for you and your region in tackling illicit financial flows, please address that. Welcome to you, and the floor is yours for the next 2 to 3 minutes, please. Thank you very much.
Muy buenos días, muy buenas tardes.
Very good day to you, very good afternoon, and very good evening to you all. In El Salvador, we have basically taken on through our President of Government, Najib Bukele, we have initiated our process of re-engineering our international taxation. On the 3rd of October 2019, we set out on this journey, and we wanted to renew our fiscal revenues through our unit of repatriation of tax avoidance revenues. And so they've been coming into basically personal accounts of those dodgy business people, should I call them. And so that's when we wanted to look for a strategic partner who would help us to train our tax inspectors so that we could go after these illicit financial flows. And through this program, Tiwb, this has been a real help to us when it's come to training all of our tax inspectors and auxiliary personnel as well, so that we've been able to really give them a more wide-ranging international tax administration training as regards elimination of different types of activities such as bearer shares, etc., so that we can actually uncover who the final beneficiaries of these types of transactions are. And in this sense, we've been able to considerably strengthen our unit through the training that we've had from Tiwb. There's still a long way to go. There's still a lot of topics to tackle, and we're talking about, you know, international digitalization of tax administration. There's a lot of the flows are going through there, and one of our sharpest challenges at the moment is finding the necessary tools so as to deal with this type of tax administration. As regards things that would come under the priorities that Latin America should have and the priorities that our region should have as regards fighting against tax avoidance. I think that what's really important is the recently published figures that says that we actually lose at the moment 6.1% of our GDP, and we're talking about $25 million that we lose that we should be taxing in our region. And so that would be used so as to bridge the gap in equality, and we'd be able to use that for our economic recovery and recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. So anything that we can do is going to allow us to close that gap as regards education in our countries as well. And so with the non-face-to-face training, we've already started to tackle that massive gap at the moment, but we need these resources. We need the resources from these taxes that should be paid but that are being avoided. And so we really need to use the Tiwb as a key way to strengthen our region's administrations. And I think that we should all start using it in a more widespread way, far more than we've been using it to date. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I think you've raised at least 2 very interesting points. One is that Tax Inspectors Without Borders is not just about getting the money in through audits, but it's also about capacity building. So thank you for highlighting that, but also for making the direct link between the money that you may be able to recover from avoidance and evasion, and that being of significant value to directly link to addressing inequality, which is, I'm sure, all of our objectives in so many countries. So thank you very much for that. I now would like to turn to Ahmed Kudshuk, who is the Vice Minister of Finance for Egypt. And Ahmed, it's great to see you again. And you've been working with Tax Inspectors Without Borders for some years now. So perhaps you'd like to reflect on what impact you're achieving, and maybe you could say a bit about how the partnership between OECD and UNDP has operated for you on the ground. Great to see you again, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ben, and thank you for inviting us. And it's great to meet a lot of colleagues today and to be within this very enriching dialogue. I also want, before starting, also to commend the OECD for the two-pillar solution. It's a great achievement, and it's again a signal that multilateral cooperation can work and can deliver. Back to your question, I think since 2017, we have been working extensively with the Tax Inspectors Without Borders on both on transfer pricing issues as well as on the exchange of information issues. Both are very important tasks. But let me say that the main issue here is that we all face similar challenges. We are all trying to mobilize more revenues to meet our SDGs commitments, our development objectives, the needs for our people, and this is a top priority for us. We need to do this in a very good way, and at the core of this is people, capacity, skills at the tax authorities, and this is where Tax Inspectors Without Borders can play a big role. It's this enhancing the capacity and the ability of our people to be able to deliver based on best practices. And I think, especially on transfer pricing, their ability and the training that we got to prepare the guidelines and to do the transfer pricing audits has been incredibly supportive. It allowed us to have skill transfers and organization capacity building at the Ministry of Finance and at our tax authority. It allowed us to deliver and so to change the mindset at the taxpayers level, to encourage and to enhance the presence of multinationals and other leading international firms. It allowed us to also to have better knowledge management at the tax authority, and more importantly, or equally importantly, it allowed us also to identify some loopholes and some issues that signal that we need to do some legislative reforms as well as procedural reforms, and both were implemented in that regard. And there is an outcome for that. I mean, as we speak today, transfer price related adjustments have approximately led us to collect and mobilize additional 1 billion Egyptian pounds, which are more than around $65 million so far, and this is growing by the day. Also, on the exchange of information, there has been a lot of progress, and it's also another important area where developing countries and emerging countries would need a lot of capacity building there to be able to make the full utilization of this very important area and to be able to get more information and exchange more information so that all countries can benefit and can deal with the global and international taxation in a much more equitable and efficient way. I just have also to commend the UNDP country office, which has been on the ground providing a lot of support in the implementation of the program, and more recently also providing a lot of other support during this COVID pandemic period. I think this has been great, and we really looking forward to work more in the future in new areas, including, of course, one of the most important areas, which is taxation for environment and tax policy for SDGs. Both of them are very interlinked, but to them, for us, it's top priority how we can have a much more conducive tax regime that can enable green recovery and climate change, and also how we can have also a wider tax policy regime that can also facilitate our commitment to our SDGs goals. I will stop here, but I also want to thank everybody for all the support since 2017 with the Egyptian Tax Authority and with the Egyptian Ministry of Finance.
Thank you very much, Vice Minister, and for highlighting in your case the very real revenues that you have derived from this form of cooperation. That's great to hear. Let me turn now to Her Excellency Catherine Gunsadze, who is Deputy Minister of Finance from Georgia. And I guess similar questions to you, Deputy Minister, if you could set out what role TIWB has played in your fight against international tax avoidance and tax evasion. And also perhaps you'd like to comment on whether you have seen over time an improvement in tax compliance, because that's probably the ultimate objective, is to change the behavior of large companies. So perhaps you would like to comment on those two questions. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me also thank you for inviting me here for this panel. I'm honored to be here. And special thanks to Rusudan, who used to be the Deputy Minister of Finance at earlier stages of our tax policy reforms back home in Georgia. So thank you for the question. The tax inspectors without border programs have helped Georgia to build the tax auditor skills and confidence, leading to organizational change, improved service delivery, better cooperation with the taxpayers, and increased tax compliance during our long-standing reforms. In general, I think I would say that Georgia has been lucky to receive quite a support in its PFM-related reforms, including on tax administration side. The experts deployed under the programs in Georgia confirmed that through the programs which supported Georgia Revenue Service auditors, they have improved their ability to conduct high quality audits. The hands-on practical approach supported them to improve their skills and confidence in managing complex transfer pricing audit cases. Georgia started to receive the support from since 2016, and as the program commenced and the experts started to work with the local auditors, the Georgian Revenue Service really recognized the impact of transfer pricing audits on the DRM efforts. So as a result, Georgia Revenue Service created a dedicated transfer pricing division and expanded the team to include 10 members who are at this process fully engaged in transfer pricing audits. Setting up the division has enabled the members to build expertise in the highly specialized area of tax. So to continue of whether Georgian Revenue Service has approved an improvement in tax compliance, of course, the improvements are noticeable, and especially I think when we deal with the post-COVID period and see the economic recovery at this point and the tax overperformance in the not even a post-COVID, still in COVID period. This could be a proof of how the tax administration and tax compliance works in this country. Of course, this is a complex issue and has many dimensions that supports to this tax compliance and overperformance at this point. Taxpayers are becoming more attentive to the clarity and completeness of the information they disclose in their tax returns. Examples show that taxpayers have adjusted their transfer pricing reports of the increased reports in general because of this increased expertise from the auditor side and more comprehensive audit approaches. So they try to avoid practices in the determination of related party interest rates, management fees, and royalty rates. And taxpayers' documentations of the related party transactions have also improved significantly. Well, these outcomes illustrate how the tax inspectors without borders complements the broader efforts on tax transparency and BEPS. So I would like to thank you on behalf of the Revenue Service to the programs which supported Georgia throughout its reforms. And just hope for the continued cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, and for sharing your experience in particular on how you see over time tax compliance moving in the right direction. And as you say, Georgia has participated in many of the international tax cooperation initiatives and moving fast from the Global Forum into the BEPS project. And as you say, TIWB is a nice complement to those initiatives, and they all seem to work in your case successfully as a package. So thank you very much for your thoughts. Let me now turn to Tulani Shongwe, who, as I said, is Manager Resource Mobilization at ATAF and has been a great partner with the OECD for, well, years. And it's great to have you here in place of Mary Baina, who unfortunately can't be with us, but it's great to see you, Tulani. And maybe you can comment on, as the other speakers have commented on, how this kind of initiative, this kind of audit initiative, TIWB, and the related work that ATAF undertakes in partnership with the OECD and UNDP plays out in the continent. Maybe you could start there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you to TIWB for welcoming us to this discussion. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, colleagues. I think firstly, let's stress the importance of the program that ATAF and TIWB are engaged in is a broader technical assistance program, and that lays the building blocks and the foundation for technical assistance to take place. So one of the priority areas, of course, are effective legislation, improved risk assessments, and training workshops to upskill relevant revenue officials in undertaking their day-to-day tasks. The work that ATAF and TIWB have done on the continent has resulted in tremendous results that Rusudan has also highlighted. So I'll give you an example of the efforts to mobilize domestic resources have resulted in assessments of over 2.3 billion US dollars, as well as a collection of over 900 million US dollars. And I think those figures indicate the level of success that the partnership is having on the African continent. Additionally, in our efforts to mobilize domestic resources in Africa, we have seen transfer pricing disputes and adjustments. In one such case, our work has resulted in a landmark Supreme Court victory for the Zambia Revenue Authority in their dispute with the Mopani copper mines. And that dispute resulted in additional revenue of 40 million US dollars. Additionally, the programs are looking at broadening audit results and audit skills for revenue officials. Again, pointing to Zambia, which is a TIWB program with ATAF, as well as a partnership from the Intergovernmental Forum on Mining. We have seen tremendous gains in this country. Since 2016, we have seen the number of mining sector companies paying taxes double, and that increase has resulted in additional revenue of about 240 million US dollars. In 2016, when the program started, we saw those mining companies contributing CIT of around $60 million. And as early as this year, we're looking at figures of about 320 million US dollars. So the programs are very successful. We are working in partnership to ensure that we deliver programs that assist countries not only to collect revenue, but to build the necessary skills to have business continuity and skills transfer within the revenue administration. Additionally, our programs are focused on ensuring tax certainty in ensuring that taxpayers can interact with the revenue administration and increase compliance. And therefore, we ventured out into other areas such as unilateral advanced pricing agreements and other agreement measures taken up by countries. I'll stop there for now, Ben, and I look forward to the discussion later. Thank you.
Maybe Tilani, as we've got a bit of time, I could ask you a follow-up question on illicit financial flows, which is obviously a massive theme in Africa and beyond. And maybe you could set out how some of the things that you've been talking about might apply to fighting illicit financial flows on the continent, and how TIWB in the directions that we're proposing to take it can help there. Maybe you could comment briefly on that.
Certainly, and thank you for that follow-up question. Importantly, we're looking at the commercial transactions that affect illicit financial flows, and basing our studies from the high-level panel report on illicit financial flows from Africa. The side of commercial activities is important. So we're looking at areas such as transfer pricing, aggressive transfer pricing, might I add, interest deductions, and aggressive tax planning. And these are areas that we've seen can be manipulated and can be used for ill gains by aggressive planners. Not all multinationals, but certainly there is a fair amount of evidence of these commercial activities taking place. Now, in order to combat this, the priority here is to improve legislation, is to improve regulations, is to improve the interaction between the taxpayer and the tax administration. We've also seen that easier to interpret legislation leads to greater compliance, but also leads to the comfort in officials working in revenue administrations that they can go into cases backed by modern legislation and supported by the legislative structure within the country. Of course, transparency is an important part in this, and of course, and therefore our focus is also on exchange of information, interagency cooperation within countries, and also looking at some of the trade and customs corruption and mishandling of invoices as priority areas. Lastly, we have seen the numbers around illicit financial flows, and they tend to hamper African countries severely. Our intention is to reduce those numbers by going into partnership with partners like TIWB, where we can assist countries with hands-on audit support. And these, as we've indicated, have led to significant gains in revenue, and we anticipate the same will happen in terms of combating illicit financial flows. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tilani, and thank you in your first intervention for raising the issue of the extractives, which is clearly a make or break issue for so many countries. I see there's a couple of questions in the chat on this topic, asking where TIWB has got to in terms of our work on the environment and on its extractives. Well, we're, as Tilani has said, we're quite well advanced on doing work on the extractives, and you may want to look at the eye-watering amounts of money at stake in the case of Mongolia, which is on our TIWB website, and our work on the environment we're right at the beginning of, so we'll come back to that in future meetings. So, Tilani. That leads us to our final speaker, Vice Minister Angela Madrid, Deputy Director of the Tax Administration of Honduras. Welcome to you. And my question to you, Deputy Director, are about South-South cooperation. TIWB has made quite a lot of inroads in using experts and resources from all over the world, but maybe you could comment on that. And maybe you could comment in particular also on the direction that TIWB is going in terms of our work on tax crime investigation, which I know you're starting to be involved with. So your views on those topics would be gratefully received. The floor is yours, and welcome.
Muchas gracias. Buenos días, buenas tardes.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good afternoon. Thank you to the organisers, first off, to the participants and to the other panelists. It really is an honor for me to be able to talk to you in this webinar and to be able to share with you our experience from quite a young tax administration. I say that because we've only been up and running for 5 years this coming January. So I think that's why it's particularly important to share with you at this junction what we feel is the most important part or the best experiences and the benefits that have come out of this experience of this South-South initiative. As a tax administration entity, we feel that these activities where we're accompanied by more mature tax administrations and international orgs that help the tax administrations of developing countries are so fundamentally important because they help us to strengthen our institutions. And we also feel and we believe firmly that the exchanges of these experiences strengthen us, and that platforms like that which is being launched at the moment, such as the eSource Learning platform, are going to help us with our training of our actual colleagues and everyone who works with us in the detention and investigation of criminal tax crimes. And we know that this is an extraordinary opportunity to make the most of these initiatives that are going to be able to allow us to have an early warning system on this type of contact taking place, because these criminals also organise and plan. And so as tax administrations around the world, we have to join forces, especially in this post-pandemic era where these capital flows and commercial movements don't stop, they're ongoing. And so we therefore have to join forces so as to be able to effectively fight against tax crime. And these initiatives, we hope, are going to be able to contribute to us to allow us to work on domestic tax planning and fight against aggressive tax evasion practices. And so we feel that all of these norms and processes and all of these fiscalization efforts that we're involved in are going to be able to help us to combat and, well, first off, identify this type of tax crime, and they allow us to be able to develop and mature our processes of taxation to this end. And we also feel that in our tax administration system, we've been able to create a specialised unit, which is called the General Inspectorate. From 2017, that's been up and running, to 2022. That's its first mandate. We also have a national anti-evasion task force that is going to allow us to, in a coordinated fashion with the public ministries and the police, identify this type of activity. We're also working with the intelligence services of the Republic, and we feel that this is key to fighting against tax fraud crimes. And in this month of November, we're already starting up formally our first stage of what is our mentoring program with the Mexican Interior Affairs Mexican department. And this is going to, of Hacienda in Mexico, and this is going to help us to revise our legal framework, and on the part of both institutions. Working with the Mexican Finance Ministry is also going to enable us to identify those areas for improvement where we're going to be able to strengthen our skills with the skills and training that they're going to give us. And we've also been able to undertake our first analysis case. And we think that that's the most important part of these exchanges, in this case, between more mature finance ministry or tax administration, that of Mexico, and then ours, which is obviously the less mature one. And that's why the tax administration services need to speak out about what we're looking for from IFSF and the South-South cooperation, which is precisely that. And what we want is to strengthen our capacities, capacity building and skills training on absolutely everyone on our side that is involved in the detection and the fight against these tax crimes, and that extending and rollout of this knowledge that we could have so as to pass it on to our colleagues, and that we've been able to identify to our sponsors, such as the Finance Secretary in Mexico or Secretariat in Mexico, we feel is going to boost us strategically. And we're also going to be able to basically exchange and partake in those best practices in criminal investigations, like I say, that they already undertake in the Mexican Finance Secretariat, so that we can go about an early identification of these tax crimes through an appropriate management of the risks involved, which allows us from the Intelligence Department, the General Inspectorate, and everyone else that comes in between and in an international scale, so that we can go about identifying at an early stage these illicit flows and combat them early on, thus being able to fight against this type of crime. At the end of the day, what we also hope to achieve from these processes and these initiatives is we hope that they're reviewed and we are able to strengthen our newly implemented processes. So basically, at the end of the day, what we're talking about is an overall exercise of institutional strengthening, that is of our young institution. And so I hope that in this early intervention, I've been able to summarize everything that we've got out of this initiative, as well as our hopes for the coming stages as of November, etc. And we're going to start off with the exchange of experiences and identifying the points that we need to improve on with the Finance Secretariat from Mexico, as mentioned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice Minister, and for setting out the massive challenges you face in taking on tax crime investigation. This must be one of the most challenging areas of international tax cooperation, and we're delighted to be able to help where we can. It's interesting that the way you describe your partnership with Mexico. Obviously the regional and cultural and linguistic dynamics matter greatly in this area, particularly when sensitive matters are at stake. So thank you very much for that. That brings us to the end of the first round. We're inundated with a number of questions and messages and comments in the chat, so we won't be able to deal with them all. There's just a couple of questions that are probably best targeted to the Secretariat, in particular about the relationship between TIWB and the two-pillar solution. And there was one question about whether countries can benefit from TIWB, those that are outside of the two-pillar agreement as agreed in October, and the answer is yes, for sure. Any developing country can apply for TIWB assistance. And secondly, I think there was a question about when TIWB might interface with the implementation of the two-pillar agreement. Well, it's early days yet, and we're clearly looking at downstream audit issues, particularly from so-called Amount B issues under the Pillar 1 agreement. But there are a number of questions for the panelists, and let me set out a couple of those, and then I'll ask each of you in turn to address one or more of these. So firstly, there's a question about the challenges of converting taxes that are assessed into revenues, money in the bank, and what are the challenges you face in that? There's a general question about how the private sector in your countries react to your reforms, and whether they are in favour for the reasons of tax certainty or against. And I'm sure that each country has a different experience there. And then there's a question about how far the digitalization of tax administration is actually helping you with tax collection and improving integrity. So maybe we could just go in turn, starting with Alejandro. Maybe you'd like to address one or all of those, and we'll take a minute from each of you in order. So the floor is yours, Alejandro. And if not, if the minister's not available, maybe we could turn to you, Ahmed. I know you've got to rush, but maybe you can.
Hola, Ben. No, con mucho gusto, perdón.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sorry. I'd be very glad to answer that.
Sure.
I just wanted, I'd understood that the Secretariat was going to answer first off, so I was trying to give them the space to do that, but perhaps I was confused. So I don't know, I have a bit of a dodgy connection, a Wi-Fi connection, so I kind of there was a bit that cut out in terms of just what was said immediately before you invited me to speak.
Yeah, it was asking, Minister, whether you would like to comment on three issues. One is the challenges of converting taxes assessed into real revenues. Secondly, what the feedback is from the private sector on your reforms. And thirdly, on the power of digitalization to improve tax collection and integrity. And you're welcome to comment briefly on one or two of those topics. Thank you.
Con mucho gusto. Voy a tratar de ser.
Of course, I'll try and be as brief as possible so that the other participants can also have time to share their perspectives. Okay, so I think that the most important aspect of all of this international taxation issue is that we shouldn't criminalize our business people. We have to remember that taxpayers are our main allies in this fight, because if there's no voluntary tax payment, we're not going to be able to do anything so as to be able to go after those who try to avoid paying their taxes. And so I think that what's really important is to set precedents and dissuade people from committing these tax crimes, but we can't from the offset think that they're all tax evaders and they're all criminals, right? So I think that what's important here is that we have to actually send out those messages that might actually attract private investment, saying that, look, you can actually go back and you can correct some of those conducts. You know, this is a precedent that's helped us a lot in El Salvador, and this is a voluntary action at the end of the day. And this is something that any tax administration should try to achieve, you know, so that they feel that voluntarily going through this, they're going to save themselves a lot of pain and headaches with the tax people. So they're going to want to do it to avoid themselves headaches. And so then we're going to be able to just get on with what we do, which is recover and collect taxes. And so as regards taxes that have been collected, as regards international tax administration initiatives, what they can help us with is visualizing and making more visible those strategic public investment projects that are going to basically boost the GDP in our country. And so we can see, look, these are the taxes that we've been able to recover from tax evasion, which is a silent crime, obviously a hidden crime, it's invisible. So these recovered taxes that should have been paid, what are we investing them into? What do they actually mean on paper? You know, we're talking about information technology, education, healthcare, and in our particular case in El Salvador, that we had a severe security challenge. As you know, we're currently dealing with that at the moment. So these four areas are really important for the whole of Latin America, but specifically for our region. So I'd say that those three areas, at least in the post-COVID era, should be dealt with through the flows of cash that we manage to get back from these tax evaders. And obviously digitalisation is a sharp learning curve for us and a sharp challenge, because we know that obviously all financial flows are moving about in a quite camouflaged way. So we have to be very cautious and not just think, you know, all e-commerce and all digitalisation is being used to hide financial flows. You know, we need to be careful, because we can actually fall into the trap of actually setting back the advances that we've made in terms of innovation in our country. So I think that's the challenge, if you like, that we're faced. It's a delicate balance. You know, how do we modernise our tax administration? We've given them these complementary avenues without making our administration any more complex. We have to watch out for that as well. It has to be done from the inside out. How can we better this without passing this heavy extra activity to taxpayer? There's nothing worse than a taxpayer having to actually sweat when they come to pay their taxes, and it's a complex and horrible task. Basically, we have to make sure that we have to use this information that we have at our availability to go after tax avoiders and evaders. And I think that that's something that in every country we'll all have our own specific cases. In El Salvador, we are on that mission, and we're going to continue to follow it through with the help of the Tiwb. Thank you. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, and particularly for your balanced perspective on those issues, very important. Vice Minister Kuchuk, I know you have to leave us shortly, but would you like to comment on this round of questions? We have a couple of minutes each left for each speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'll be very brief also to give time for others. But both on having a very tax certainty and having your policies and regulations in place in a good shape and in line with best practices is of course a must for having also a stable environment and for attracting FDI and for attracting the right type of investors. And so enhancing the capacity and the implementation and closing the gap between also reality and or the implementation and what's in the laws itself is a very important dimension. Digitalization also, you mentioned digitalization, and I think it's what's taking most of the time now in most of the countries. And here I just want to say that it's not only about having the right infrastructure and having large or having a very important reforms that allow digital payments and digital audits and digital submission of the digitally submission of all the tax returns, but also about the people themselves and their ability and to use data and use big data and to use this wealth of information that's now available in a lot of countries and to make use of it in the most efficient and good way. Also, the integration between the databases and between information at different entities within the country, and also through the exchange of information systems between countries. And all this is basically tools that are available, but at the core of it is people's ability to make use of this in the most efficient way. So I think this is the key message, that it's good that we are working on all fronts, but it all comes back to the people and their ability, our people and our tax people ability to grasp this in the most efficient way, and also to benefit from the training available and from the capacity building available, including the capacity building available through the tax inspector without borders. Thank you so much.
Thank you for reminding us of the human factor and the need to engage in human resource development and training, which tax inspectors very much does. So thank you for that. We're down to our last couple of minutes, I'm afraid. So if Deputy Minister Gonsadze would like to comment very briefly please do so now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, I would agree with the previous statements. Human resources and human capacity is one of the keys in this process. With all the reforms, I think in the beginning, uncertainties are always high. The same was with the transfer pricing regulation when was introduced, but with the active cooperation and communication in place with the clients or beneficiaries or taxpayers in general, these processes can be fine-tuned, and then the voluntary compliance rate significantly increases with the communication and cooperation increased. And of course, electronic services and digitalization is key to this as well. Making availability of those services to the taxpayers will also benefit very much to their voluntary compliance in the reforms introduced. So I think that I'll be very brief as well.
Great, thank you very much for sharing that experience. Penultimately, Talani, would you like to address one of those questions?
Certainly, and thank you. I think the challenge about taxes assessed and taxes collected, that remains, but improved regulations is one way to assess taxes and then go through regulatory prescribed laws in a country that will see the taxpayer being able to raise an appeal. And in some of our member countries, we have tax tribunals that rule on those appeals. And then the money is allocated into the coffers, so to speak, of government. But this requires, again, technical assistance in ensuring that those structures, that regulatory framework is functional and operational. And then lastly, of course, something that we've done and we'd like to expand on is giving additional support and training to judiciary, because complexity of tax is something that is unique, and the judiciary at times don't deal with these matters. Thank you.
Thanks for raising that, Talani, a massive issue all over the world, and we all have a task to support the judiciary in making good sense of this complicated tax world. So thank you for that. And then finally, Vice Minister Angela Madrid, would you like to add any final comments? Thank you.
Yes, I think that within this whole component, we've always got that strengthening of the institutions, and we know that the institutions should have, you know, a regulatory framework that's robust, that's strong. They should ideally have staff that are trained and that have developed these skills, and that should also have platforms or technological infrastructure available to them that ideally is going to help collaborators of these tax administrations to actually carry out this type of work. The issue with digitalization is that it allows us to get to this fine balance of what is making things easy and also controlling people, you know. So it's basically thought up to put these services, digital services, at the availability of people so that they can pay their taxes more easily, and they can therefore comply with their tax payments, but without forgetting about the control element through the different tools that are going to allow us to analyze and basically cross-analyze and cross-check data through different intelligence platforms. And we're going to be able to data check big data, and artificial intelligence can also help us to control and as regards early warning systems where these conducts are being violated, you know, and you've got these tax crimes that are underway. So we know that digitalization and strengthening of our technological skills is going to basically make it easier to pay tax, but also make it easier for tax authorities to control tax payments. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And that is a useful reminder that on TIWB's to-do list is the idea that we would explore how TIWB could support tax administration and technology and the exchange of experiences worldwide. So we'll be coming back to that in future meetings, no doubt. So I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. I would like to thank all of our fantastic panelists for all of their thoughts on a rich and diverse range of issues. And it's been a great discussion, and thank you so much for participating. It's now time to hand back to Marcos. The floor is yours, Marcos, to lead us to the closing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you very much for all the panelists. You know, it's been a great conversation. I think it is pretty clear that the word, the global word of taxation is changing fast. I do think that the experience we've heard it from Honduras, El Salvador, two countries that are very close to my heart. I used to live, ministro, yo vivía muchos años en El Salvador. I used to live
in El Salvador for many years.
In Honduras very much. So, as well as deputy ministers from Georgia and Egypt, and our eternal friend on ATAF, our partner. So it was a fantastic conversation. I think things are changing, and TIWB is going to have to evolve to match the new reality that comes with the two pillars, as well as support you and many other governments to make sure that you have the resources necessary to, you know, achieve your climate commitments or your sustainable development goals commitments, and you can count on TIWB, OECD, UNDP to support you on that. I also want to thank the Secretary General of OECD and the Administrator of UNDP. And in finalizing, I just really want to thank our own teams, Ben, our secretariats. You know, it's 12 months of incredibly hard work to make it the service of TIWB available to the countries and to the partners that we heard today, and to many more. I think if you peruse in detail the annual report, you're going to find a lot of critical and important information. And I'm already looking forward to reporting back 12 months from now. So in that sense, thank you, Rusudan, Atashan, and all of the team in Paris and New York and around the world. As Atashan mentioned earlier, we now have people helping much closer to the action. So thanks for the Secretariat, thanks to UNDP country offices that are stepping up and supporting all of this. So with that, I close this meeting and bid you farewell, a good night, a good afternoon, and a good morning, wherever you are. And I look forward to seeing you in the next meeting. Keep on the good work. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.